Art of Yes. Interview with Joe Bill. Hello, Joe Bill. Welcome to my house.
Oh my gosh, I love what you've done with this place. It's wonderful.
I show you a bit. This
The,
is
the lamp, very smart. Look at those bookcases. I sense that there's maybe a couple of improv books. Yes.
very few. I have few books.
Yeah.
Welcome to Warsaw. Nice to see
Thank
you.
you. It's nice to be here. May I have a pierogi, please?
Oh yes, I just prepared them. I will serve them.
Mm.
Oh yeah,
Nom, 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 nom.
I just did with meat. Which one is your favorite one? Um,
Uh, my favorite one is the next one, whatever it is.
the next one is with spinach and French cheese.
I love it. Or with cabbage or sauerkraut,
Oh
or
yes, this is our Christmas
po-
stuff.
yes, or potatoes, like the potato and chives or garlic or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's
you live in Chicago, so you have some Polish shops there and Polish people, right?
yes, we have a big Polish population in Chicago. And if you come to Chicago someday, I will take you to Milwaukee Avenue, and it's the old Polish neighborhood. And you can see maybe 3 kilometers of just Polish shops, and you can go in and say, ah, you're doing this right, you're doing this wrong. No, more Polish, please. No, this is not real Polish, this is Ukrainian. No, be Polish.
Actually, this might be more Polish than it's here because people brought these recipes there quite a long time ago, I guess.
All the authentic Polish food is in Chicago.
Might be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe. Joe, how are you? How are
I'm
you
okay. The
today?
the world is crazy, but I'm okay.
Are you okay?
I'm surviving.
I'm so glad that we meet because I want to talk with you about improv. What is the time?
Please, let's talk about improv. Thank Monica. I really hope we can talk about improv.
Thank you for taking the invitation and coming to Warsaw.
Yeah, it's very good. I was supposed to come to Warsaw this year, but because all of my tours were canceled, no Warsaw, no Finland, no Romania, no, where else was I going to go there? Germany.
Belgium?
Yeah, I was in Belgium to begin the year.
Ah,
So after the festival in Amsterdam, I went to Belgium and France. I guess that was it. Just the Netherlands and France and Belgium. Yeah. Then I would. Yeah, I go to Belgium a lot because I have my friends in Brussels, Kelly at Impro Bubble, and
oh yeah.
uh, all of those guys. And is it and Providence? Where's Patrick and Peggy and?
And Phil is there now, I think,
Mm-hmm.
with Kelly and Bubble in Impro Bubble. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good spot. That's a good spot.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you for about your beginning in improv because as far as I know, it was that early that I was a little kid already,
Yeah.
but I was there. um,
Yeah. So maybe I learned improv in high school in 1977. So maybe you were not born yet.
I was.
Oh, you must have been just a baby.
Yes, I was.
Um, but yeah, so it was, what is that, 43 years ago. And it was part of a drama class. So as part of sort of a general uh, lessons in theater and performing, the teacher had us do, gosh, I've told different versions of this story before, but I can't remember exactly what the first improv thing I did was, But I knew it was making stuff up, and I knew even at that age, when I tried to memorize lines, my brain would become very anxious. So I loved the idea to just make stuff up.
Mhm.
And I'm sure I was a 15-year-old kid that was not funny or a good actor, but there was something there that made me go, I wonder what this is. I wonder how I can do this some more. So that was it.
That was it. I like what
Hmm.
you're saying because when I talked to David, he said the same that his first lessons were like theater lessons, which had improv games in it, which is very different for me what we experience now, which is like doing improv separately from acting. And uh, I feel it may be there is a maybe there is a difference now.
Yeah, yeah, we learned games too for sure, but we also, when we would learn scenes of a play, so we would learn a scene for two people and we would learn our lines and do the scene, but also part of the practice was imagine you are these two characters and you don't have these two lines. Then what might these two characters do if they were at the zoo? What might these two characters do if they were waiting at an airport? So you would do 1 minute scenes as characters from a play,
Mhm.
but you got to imagine that you were the characters. And I think she called this like subtext or inner work or something theatrical, where I thought, oh, okay. And I liked it. I thought she did tell us that improv was a thing that actors use to understand their characters better. So I think at that age, I didn't realize that this would be more the type of improv that I would focus on even more than games. But yeah, I feel very lucky that I got to have that part of the education about improv and to understand that possibility while I was also just learning games.
Ah, that's great. But was it in this was in Chicago or somewhere else?
No, I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana,
Yeah.
and so it is the city that is known for the Indianapolis 500, the car race. And we also, I don't know if this is still true, but we had the largest children's museum in the United States. So there was a giant museum where children can go and see things and learn things, but also an area where you could paint or do stuff with clay or create. And then the rest is, yeah, mostly just it's a big city that is sort of clean but surrounded by farms. And
Mhm.
so it is a state where there's just they grow a lot of corn.
So the adventure of Chicago was like connected to improv. You came to Chicago for improv.
Yeah, Chicago was about a 3 or 3.5 hour drive to the north of Indianapolis. And Indianapolis is in the middle of a bunch of different cities. Uh-oh, I think I'm going to sneeze. I will mute. Oh, no, maybe no sneeze, but it's that feeling it's a wonderful feeling and a terrible feeling. Uh, yeah. Um, excuse me. uh, so Indianapolis is a big city, and there's a bunch of big cities that surround it.
Mhm.
So a lot of times when you grow up there, you have an allegiance to either Chicago or St. Louis or Louisville or Cincinnati or Detroit, maybe Cleveland. And so I always liked Chicago. I liked the sports teams from Chicago. And then when I was in university at Indiana University, which is just 1 hour in the opposite direction from Chicago, that's when I first learned about Second City. And I was in an improv group that Mick Napier and another guy founded called Double Take. And it became we all did stuff together for 2 years. I was the first one to graduate, and it became apparent that we would all probably make our way up to Chicago because that's where Second City was, that's where Del Close was. So for me, that was 1985.
85. Yeah, that's a great story because I didn't hear about that. But you
Yes.
said that you made friendship with Mike before Chicago. I just didn't know that. Oh,
Yeah, with Mick Napier and Mark Sutton and Faith Soloway, Eric Waddell, Dave McNerland for a little bit. It was Mick Napier and Dave McNerland were the people that started our university improv group.
mhm.
And then the rest of us, it was about half of us that had moved up to Chicago. And then Mark Sutton, who I do my Bass Prov show with, he came up. I moved up in 85, and I think Mick and Faith and them came up like maybe 86 or 87, something. But by 1987, I think everybody was up. And so, yeah, then it took maybe 2 more years then to sort of gather the people, including David Razowsky, who would then go on to sort of be the founding group of Annoyance Theater under Mick Napier's direction.
I will come to Annoyance soon, but
Yes, yes,
but before
we
that,
yes, we will get to Annoyance. I always do.
before we go there, I would like to ask you because I remember interview with you and this was the interview where you were invited by Patty Stiles and with Gary Schwartz.
Oh yeah,
And it was really interesting because you three were studying with Viola Spolin, with Del Close, and with Keith Johnston. And,
yes.
and even though Patty didn't say much because she was a host and she was asking you two guys, but there was a lot of good stuff in that.
Mm. It's funny you should mention that because I was just I taught a workshop for some people in Tokyo, and there was a woman in this class on a Zoom class who was very interested in Spolin. And I told her about this interview with Patty and Gary, but I could not find it anywhere. So if when we're finished, if you can send it to me, then I will send it to Japan.
Well,
And isn't that crazy that that's how the world works now? I don't know. I will try to find it for you, lady in Japan. Let me speak to my friend in Poland. She will have it. Okay, thank you.
that's how it works, networking, right?
Yeah, that's it. Networking is everything.
Okay, so there was a good and fun stuff and quite interesting for me because you three were talking about teachers and I'm really interested in a few things connected to that. One
Okay.
one thing is how teaching in those days was different to teaching nowadays because there were no schools, not many schools like now. The teachers were different because they were more actors, not really improvisers, or sometimes like Viola, Keith, they also sometimes didn't even improvise. But there was
Hmm.
probably something in common between this.
Um, boy, there's a lot of ways that we could talk about this. Um, it's true that in those days, improvisation was either training for actors, in the case of Keith and Dell, or in the case of Spolin, she started using improvisation as a tool for immigrant women in Chicago to who spoke different languages. My understanding, and Gary Schwartz would be a good person to ask about this, but my understanding is she had women from different countries who spoke different languages who were, trying to assimilate into Chicago, and then she would have them do gibberish, improv gibberish, and play scenarios in gibberish. And so then she developed games, and some people say that Improvisation for the Theater, her book, is like, for some people it is their improv bible. And it's like it's the book is too long for me to read because I have a very short attention span. But for sure, she's probably the mother of modern improvisation. In So her background in improvisation, I think, was using improvisation for things beyond the theater and maybe for more important reasons. And then in the 70s, there was Keith and Del, and then also Augusto Boal, who is in Brazil. So at this time, and Boal used improvisation for social justice, and so he was a little bit in the same realm as Spolin, but also different. But Keith and Del, Keith was not an improviser; he was a playwright and a director,
Mhm.
and Del was an actor and like a carnival performer and a fire eater and and a pagan and a warlock and all of this stuff. But he was truly a performer. And I think in terms of those two schools, I think Keith teaches like a director and like a playwright. So when he says everything we do is for the audience, he thinks like a playwright or a director would think in terms of what do we need to do to serve the audience interest. And he's British and he's a nerd and he's read everything in the world and he likes comic books and has a peculiar sense of humor. And Del Close is American and a drug addict and a drug enthusiast and a nerd, and he has read every book in the world and he likes comic books and has a weird, dark sense of humor. So those of us that learn from Del, we tend to learn things that are more focused from an actor point of view. And what do we notice as actors in the moment? And so we start with the presumption that the audience is full of poets and geniuses and artists, and then we are to treat each other as poets and geniuses and artists, and playing to the top of our intelligence. And so it was this very elevated, sort of high status, exalting the actor from the mouth of a drug addict who also had read everything. So in terms of Keith and Del, I describe it as, in the old days, those of us that are rooted in Del's teaching or American teaching, and I've said in a number of interviews, like I would also include Mick Napier in this because I learned some very, very key things from Del, but the most I learned from anybody was just working with Mick and then the other people from the Annoyance Theater. But I say in the States and working with Del, we learn to work from the inside out.
Mhm.
So what are we thinking? What are we feeling? What is the pattern? What is here? What's in you? How do I respond to you? And then through the patterns of our interaction, then we will find what story that we are existing in, or what performance piece we are existing in. And because Keith is a playwright, because Keith is a director, the idea is we want to know as quickly as possible what type of story we're creating, whose story is it, and then if this is the story, then how do we serve this story? And hopefully as we're building the story, we're playing characters that matter, characters that mean something to each other. And the consequence of this is a lot of times in our world, we would improvise with characters that are funny or very smart or making clever connections, but it would maybe never come together in anything that was a satisfying story. And in the Keith world, you would see people that could construct a story that would make sense, but there were characters that nobody cares about because they were like two-dimensional paper puppets who are just trying to think their way to a story. And in both of our worlds, the best improvisation is when you get a sense of both of these parts of your brain working together. So I've talked enough that I don't even remember what your original question was, but I think it was something like talk about how it's different today.
Yeah.
And so now it's just the sheer numbers. Um, I'm struck by when TJ and Dave went to, I think they did their first tour, maybe it was 10 or 15 years ago. And I think they were in Austria and they were teaching a master class of 40 people or something. And they asked, who knows what a herald is? And all 40 people raised their hands. And David had said, wow, I remember when there was only 40 people in the entire world that knew what a herald was. So it's cool that this thing that was either used to help people socially or that was just supposed to be a tool for actors to become better actors has turned into an art medium itself where there is a possibility that if we just improvise together, we could create something that we might call art.
Mhm. I asked also before, but it seems to me also quite significant that how long have you been with Dell, and if the classes were like with one teacher for longer period because there were no schools, so how was it in that time? The
I
courses, teaching.
Yeah, I came to Chicago in 1985, and I think Dell started with Sharna in 1981, I think. And so there was a school. It was originally Sharna started Improv Olympics with David Shepard, who was one of the founders of Second City. But David Shepard also had, like a lot of improvisers, anxiety issues, and he just needed to get out and do stuff. And so Sharna was, as I remember the story, and I think Sharna speaks about this somewhere you can find online, but David Shepard left. Sharna said, oh God, I need to find a guru. Dell was on hard times. And she said, she meets Dell. He told her about all the stuff that he was doing with the committee. And she said, will you come and just teach a class? I'll give you a bag of weed. And Dell said, well, all right, okay. And so by the time I arrived in 1985, the school was basically Sharna would teach you for 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever it was. And Sharna would teach you the Herald and the basic principles of improvisation that would build up to the Herald. And you would do Heralds. And then you would graduate to Dell's class. And so sometimes he would watch you do a Herald. But Dell largely was concerned with, now what else can we do? So he would just have different ideas. And I think, the idea is that Herald is not a set, fixed thing. But the idea of teaching Herald as a strict format, I think, really was Sharna's idea, just as a training structure that you learn so that you can break the structure apart and see what the options are. And Dell was much more interested in, okay, Herald is sort of a mindset. And this is, if I have to teach Herald, then I teach Herald as a mindset. And then I'll use some elements of my learning the strict version of the format. But, Herald is essentially, if you could look at a group of people and say, okay, what is the collective mind gathering here? There's already a Herald here. Then as a director, how do I get the Herald that is in all of these brains to come out? And more, I believe, well, I'm biased because this is what I teach. I believe that you trick people into doing a Herald. And you'll get closer to what a Herald is than if you try to get them to do it, to learn it regimented. But, on the other hand, it is a training tool. And sometimes I say almost sarcastically that Herald is a prison that American improvisers have to live in for 2 years so that they can learn how to escape from prison. But now it's a global proposition. So,
I remember that from your workshop.
yeah, it's a prison. But it's, yeah, now I am becoming one of the old people. So, I think there's so many people teaching so many different things right now. And I've just found I don't really concern myself so much with what anybody else is teaching. Like, all I can do is what I've got. And for me, I think if the world is better with improvisation than without improvisation, so whoever's doing improvisation, even if it's bad improvisation, that's a good thing.
There was another thing in this interview which was pretty funny. That yeah, the one thing was that Dell and Johnston and also Viola, they had a lot of books.
Hmm.
So they read a lot of stuff. But the other thing between Viola and Dell was that when you and Gary were talking about it, it seemed like they were quite tough teachers. Or
Yep.
I don't know how to say because I wasn't in the class, but it seems like
Yeah, there was Dell could be very tough. Uh, I think moody, you know the word moody.
Mhm.
And so, and I, of course, I never met Viola. I met her son. I met Paul Sills before, and he was certainly moody as I experienced him. But to hear Gary talk about Viola, yeah, it's like the old school theater teacher where they're cranky and, all right, you maggots, uh, show me some truth. And I think in a way, um, in a way, it kind of it kind of mirrors like old military training where you tear somebody down so you can build them back up. And it doesn't seem like Keith was a mean person. Like I think Dell, I don't know if I'd exactly call Dell mean, but maybe he could be impatient. And then if you tested his patience, then he could be mean. But the one time, I mean, he would insult people if they would do stupid things on stage. And the one time, I was watching everybody else get these insults, and some of them were beautiful insults. And I just thought, oh, I need to get my Del Close insult. Like, oh, I can't. But I didn't want to fuck it up on purpose. I didn't want to. But, I'm just like, oh. And it's partly because I was raised in a sporting family and my father had coached me in sports and I was used to tough discipline. Yeah. So part of my brain thought if I could just get a good insult from Dell, that would validate me as an actor.
it,
Uh,
there's
I think that,
the opposite, right? That every teacher in improv, or not every, but most of them are like very kind and nice, and then also just going back and really not giving this notes to students. Just really sometimes too kind.
yeah, I think it's too kind. I mean, if I jump forward to the annoyance, I will say one of the things I'm most proud of about annoyance is if you were going to teach at annoyance, you still had to improvise. And annoyance became the theater that was known for every teacher will give you feedback. So, like, I'd like to think that I'm nice, and I think I'm good at giving feedback, and I'm honest about feedback. And feedback is something that is maybe the most difficult part of teaching and coaching. But if I jump back to the story, I'm in class and I'm doing a scene with a guy who would go on to become a reviewer in a paper. And this was the 80s, and he had colorful suspenders on like Robin Williams. And we did a scene that was the worst. It was like if you put in a textbook a dialogue that would represent the worst possible scene you could do, that's the scene we were doing. And and Dell just says, "All right." And we look out, and I'm standing there, and there's this long pause, And we started to go off stage. No, 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 stay up there, stay up there. And then it was just this horrible silence, and I thought, oh, this is it. This is it. I'm going to get my abuse. And then Dell finally said, well, I'm not going to bother to insult this scene because nothing could be more insulting to all of us than this scene was itself. And it was like he was speaking poetry. It was very calm and very contained and very. And then I was standing there trying to figure out if that was it. Did I, did, is that, did he just do it? Did I get my, what are you doing on my stage? Get off. and I, and I went running off and only, I was in a little bit of a state of shock because what he said was like poetry, but it was the idea that there was a strange pride, like I had done something that was so insultingly bad that Dell could not come up with an insult that was worse than what I did. And for some reason, part of my brain took that as a challenge to play with an elevated sense of intellect, or with a to not go for dumb shit, to have a point of view, to it was an invitation to do work that was not trivial. And I was also quite satisfied that that's what I got from Dell, though I expected it to be what I was used to in sports. I expected it to be yelling or a finger in my face, which I had experienced plenty of that. But because it was such a beautiful commentary on how bad I was, I think, I mean, I remember it now 40 years later, or not, what was it, 85, 95, 35 years later. I still remember that moment. There's just a couple of moments that I had with him that really, really stand out, and that's one of them.
So I will close the subject of learning by the last questions. The question: what were the epiphanies? So I call it clicks, revelations, and things which helped you to understand what improv is about. So like these moments when you think, oh. That's a good thing. Like, for example, not making stupid shit or whatever, but what helped you to improve?
So there's been many. When we were at university, we used to perform in a bar once a week, sometimes twice a week, on Friday night or Friday and Saturday night. And we always wanted to do a different show every week. So we did not want to repeat material. But if we repeated something, we might repeat an improv game because it would always be different. And sometimes the shows we put up were not as good as the ones from the previous week because we challenged ourselves to always do new stuff. And in the bar where we performed, people were pretty forgiving and kind, even if it wasn't exactly great. But we knew, that one missed, that wasn't so good. So there was one time there was this music club, and it was only for music, and it would have a happy hour for college students, and it was just everybody was getting just fucking drunk. And there was a party band called Dr. Bop and the Headliners, and it was just a drinking crazy party band, and they would begin at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock on Friday, and it was just an excuse for everybody to get drunk. For some reason, we got a gig. We thought it would be a good idea to do an improv or sketch show before this party band. And I think we were contracted to do maybe 45 minutes or something like this. And so we're on a stage and there's microphones and there's microphone cables and there's the band and there's not that much space for us to do our magical theater shit. And we come out and we're like, oh, it's kind of the drunks are already starting to party and it's kind of loud and hey everybody, we're going to do improv. We're going to do some comedy for you. And from the moment we started talking, and this is me and Mick and Mark Sutton and Faith and Aaron, like this is our group. The moment we started talking and performing, we heard, "Boo! You guys suck! Fuck you! You suck! Fuck you! We want Dr. Bob!" Just screaming at us.
Wow.
And now we have 44 minutes to go. But we all decided, let's do the show. And so for 45 minutes, we did sketch, comedy, or improv, and the screaming at us never stopped. And it almost made everybody in our group more focused, but also have a sense of humor about ourselves. And there was a number of lessons I learned about that. And one is stick what you believe in
Mhm.
and analyze it at the end. Two is whenever we walk on stage together, we are writing a contract with each other that I am willing to suck with you. I am willing to be terrible with you. I'm willing to be hated by this audience with you. And that's okay because we're together. And I suppose the third is understand your audience and what they want that night. Because I could have probably learned lessons with those people had we decided, nah, let's not do this.
That's true.
So that's the
Really.
yeah
Really.
yeah of my life in improvisation. That's the first time I truly found lessons. There were many more, but I think that's probably a good story. I don't think I've told that story much
Yay!
uh,
First
for
time.
you.
Yay. Good. I'm happy about it. Great. So I would go now to annoyance. What's
Okay.
annoyance? What's annoyance? Why? With whom? And what's next?
So annoyance was half the people from our college group plus another handful of people. And it's really, others have said, and I agree, it's true. If there's no Mick Napier, there's no annoyance. I think for sure most of us that were there at the beginning would have ended up doing something else because it was a really good group of people, but the collection of people, the diversity of people, the different types of minds and brains that all work together, you know, there was a lot of talent, there was a lot of smarts, but because Mick had the ability to lead smarts and talents and egos and to help all of us keep our eye on the same target, what emerged then were people that had a sense of humor that was more dark. It ended up being a collection of people that most of us in our own way were misfits, or we were sort of outside of the norm. I suppose most theater people have some fucked up shit in their background that, that makes them want to find their voice or to pretend to be somebody else on stage. But sort of the guiding principles of Annoyance, before we were even Annoyance, we did a show that it was called Splatter Theater. Did David tell this story?
Nope.
There was a show called Splatter Theater, which is now online, one of the originals. David and I were both in it. And it was a takeoff of horror movies. but it was on a stage that was completely white with all the furniture was white, the cabinets was the wall, everything was white. And it was like a musical, except where there would normally be a song, there would be a bloody death. And by the end of the show, the entire stage and all the furniture and cabinets and couches and everything was just covered in blood and like stage blood and stage guts. And this kind of put us on the map. Before we were Annoyance, we were a group called Metroform. There was a music club called Cabaret Metro, which was very famous in Chicago. It still exists, where groups, like all kinds of different groups would play there. But then all the way up on the fourth floor, there was this attic space, and some people did some stuff up there. It was very hot. I think I did maybe one or two shows up there. I think two shows up there, and it was just, ugh. But we were just a bunch of kids fucking around. And I just remember one weekend sitting with Mick. I was the killer in this show. And Mick and I were trying to figure out what are the different deaths that we could do. And so we engineered these different deaths, and you know, I was the one that was going to have to pull them off with the different people. So it was a very engineering type thing first. We knew these were the devices that we would use. We just had to find the actors who could flesh out the characters and then discover what the story was. And the story it didn't have to be anything complex. It was just simple, because most slasher films or horror movies are really stupid, simple stories that highlight. But then out of that came weird things. Like one of the most genius things that Mick thought of early on was the show is free to get in, but you have to pay $10 to leave. And in that cast of Splatter Theater, there was most of those people ended up becoming the founders of Annoyance. And then after Splatter Theater, then was Co-Ed Prison Sluts, which was for a while the longest running musical in Chicago. I don't know if it's still true or not. It closed, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. And it became this theater where Second City had a home. It was like the big spaceship that landed on Planet Improv. And IO would jump around from place to place to place. And then Annoyance a lot of people came out of IO and some out of Second City. And then this alternative theater popped up. And so we became sort of the third institution in Chicago that was alternative and edgy and vulgar and gross, but also we wanted to help the community come together. So it's not just, this is my theater, this is your theater, that's your theater. So maybe the thing I'm most proud of is what we did to help the community come together. And certainly, Del Close used to cough a lot, and I think maybe he's visiting me now. I certainly played my role, and I'm very proud of what I did. And I'm, even to this day, I don't get to see many Annoyance people, but I'm just like, I love the time we spent and what we did. But Chicago is a theater town anyway, and I feel like Annoyance. One of the things we say in improv is 2 is pattern and 3 is dimension. And so the pattern was Second City and then IO, which was hopping around. And then Annoyance was this different enough thing that now we created the dimension of a platform for improvisational theater to be in this theater town. And for a while, improvisation was like the bastard stepchild of Chicago theater. But now, before the pandemic, there was at least 50 different tiny improv theaters in Chicago, and this is a town that supports improv. And so Annoyance really is, it's a building, but it was more of an idea that anybody with any voice, no matter how controversial or strange or damaged or hurt, it can exist and you can create theater. And the only requirement is that you're a nice person and you're willing to put your best effort in creating whatever you want to create.
So making a clarification, Annoyance is a theater, but it's also a school and a teaching place, right?
Yes.
So what's the difference, in your opinion, between Annoyance and like IO or especially second, let's say these big places, because there's a lot of schools now, and probably the most known is Second City and IO and Annoyance. And I don't know, is there something big like that? Because there's plenty of other stuff.
Yeah, there's others, but I think that the other one would maybe be Comedy Sports, which is a national thing, but it's they've had a rough time in Chicago. It's Comedy Sports is like the cheap American version of theater sports, where it's just laugh, 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 laugh. Uh, but there's skill to it, and it can be done well, but it's yeah, it is. It promises comedy. It promises comedies. So that's what the promise is. Um, IO is IO teaches group work and long form improvisation. Second City is really a comedy theater, which is rooted in the old idea that improvisation is a tool for both actors and writers to develop scripted material. And I think Annoyance is, our point of view that it's not as controversial as it used to be, but the idea is the best way for me to take care of you is for me to take care of me first. And then all of us that were at the beginning of the Annoyance that are teachers, me, Mick Napier, Mark Sutton, Susan Messing, David Razowsky, Bob Fisher, Rebecca Sohn, Rich, we all have different ideas about what that means, but we're all teaching the same thing, which is have something for yourself. The greatest gift I can give you is I've got something. And so it means start right now, and be aware of what you're doing right now. Make a powerful choice. Don't make a passive choice. So in a way, Annoyance is the thing that equips you to find your own voice, to find your own strength, to find your own sense of self, so that you can bring that to your writing, your acting, your improvising, your whatever artistic thing it is that you're doing.
That was great. I learned.
Okay.
That's great. But
Does that clear? Like you understand that?
yes, yes. And
Cool.
I also ask for people who will watch that later, because I sometimes ask questions which I don't know. I know the answer, but I want
Ah,
to pull from you,
pull it out.
pull it
Yeah,
out from you. So
yeah, I will say that my version of the Annoyance take care of yourself is usually rooted in emotion or psychology. And so what is the state in which you find yourself that I'm receiving you from? So rather than neutral, like I believe that neutral is impossible. I believe there's always something that you have. So it's really, how am I paying attention to you? How am I listening to you? Through what am I filtering you so we can have something right now? Um,
and also being natural means something, right? Because you think you
yeah,
like, but you give something.
yeah. And I have more patience for improvisation that's not funny right away. Mick, for example, like Mick wants funny. Mick likes funny. And he's even said, you can find him quoted, it's like, he has no time or patience for people who try not to be funny. So there you go. Uh, and it's, I think the commonality, even in all of us, the common thing is, how did we start, and will we keep it honest?
Yeah.
How do we start? Will we be honest? That's it. Or as Mick says, hold on to your shit. Go ahead. I need to get out of the annoyance hole.
But a little bit connected to what you've said just right now. What's the difference between comedy and funny? Because I heard like recently very nice definition of that. But I will.
You going to challenge me to come
I,
up with something
I
different or
will.
better?
No, just what because but because this is this contradiction, which I think bothers a lot of people, a lot of improvisers, especially not not advanced people, beginners, that we we hear sometimes from teachers, don't try to be funny, don't go for jokes, don't push that. But on the other hand, we do comedy, and for me there is this line where something is not funny, and or it's funny but it's not comedy, or there is a thin line between. So
Yeah, I think it's semantics, and I think the I think the argument is not as important as some people would like it to be. When you improvise, if I'm going to simplify it, there's kind of two ways. There's three focuses for improv. Like, what are you focused on? Why are we here? We're either here, we're promising comedy, improv comedy, we're promising a story, or we're promising truth. And so, in any moment, improvisation is made up of a series of moments. And if we remove games, games are improvisational structures that are engineered prior to the show, sometimes for years, that we know we will exist inside of for a part of the show.
mhm,
So now let's take those and set those aside. Why do we play games? We play games to be funny.
mhm,
And it might be we play games for comedy, but if we're playing games to be honest and natural and human, then the question is the goal comedy, or is comedy the consequence?
mhm.
Is comedy the consequence of telling the story? Is comedy the consequence of playing the game? Is comedy the consequence of us being emotionally honest within the scene? And so, this gets into my neuroscience and psychological stuff, which is, I think, my opinion is that in each of our brains we have a jazz musician and we have a engineer. And when we are playing for comedy, when we're playing to be funny, then we tend to be more in the brain of the engineer, and we tend to, because we're using words, we tend to be in a state of trying. It's almost like clowning, and it can include clowning. I think my friend Casper in Paris, one of the shortcuts to clowning, one of the shortcuts of the clown mind is you are shit. You will always be hopeful. You will always fail. Repeat. I am shit. I will try. I will be hopeful. I will fail. I am shit. I will try. I will be hopeful. I will fail. And in some ways, that formula works when people are doing comedy, but it just shows up differently.
Mhm.
I think we enjoy clowns more than we do comedians, improv comedians, because clowns use less words.
I think a little bit more truth, because they
That's
really
right.
trained in truth. Yeah, right. They have to and they have to fail in on many levels and points, because they sometimes play with themselves, so they naturally find the obstacles outside of their person.
Yes. And because clowns do not burden themselves with words as much, it is easier for them to present decisions as discoveries.
Mhm.
Whereas people that are deciding or inventing and using words, their desperation to get a laugh is more obvious. And, this is a really nuanced thing. I'm lucky enough that I have some duo partners where I'm pretty sure the consequence of us playing together is it's going to be funny, but I never have to focus on being funny. At the end of the day, I'm just an improv actor who I play with very talented people. I mean, almost, I think every one of my improv duo partners is, more funny than I am. But I'm a good, like they say in vaudeville, like I'm a straight man. I'm the setup guy. But I can also be funny.
You are funny.
Oh,
I know.
thank you.
I
But I think it's because I hope that my funny is a consequence of us kind of playing honest. But then I also have the thing about Jill Bernard and Patty Stiles is they challenge me to be silly and to have fun and to be joyful. And sometimes I have a dark Irish mind where it's like, oh, I just want to be in a tavern when it's raining outside and just think about the futility of life. But they draw me out. But both of those women have the capacity to also feel the darkness, the desperation. And it's the beauty of playing with both of them is that we can find ourselves as two characters in a world that we agree that we are living in, and we can be honest with each other, and we can just discover. And even if there's a decision made, a tactical decision within the honest emotional interaction, the decision or the tactical choice appears as part of the illusion of our belief that we are here and this is what we are about. And I think clowns do the same thing. I don't think I don't think there's any clown in the world that lives in pure discovery. I think they're masters at making it look like they are. That's why ultimately there's a sadness that goes with them as people that I admire and respect. Wow, that got deep.
Yeah, that was great. And you said the same thing in other words, which I heard. So that's really great.
Did I?
Yes.
Oh, now I want to know what the other thing is.
uh, yeah, was the difference was that making fun a funny thing. It's based on a sense of humor, and that can be funny. The things can be funny for different people. Different things can be funny, and
Hmm.
making comedy is like not being it's working with truth and consequences of the character choices and story. So
Yeah,
basically when you follow the truth and want of the character, and you desperately want something, and you just do everything to get it, uh, you just don't have to invent, and you just follow that. So
yeah,
so that's
yeah. And we're human. I mean, what's funny about humans is we're not perfect, but we pretend like we are.
yes.
I mean, it's what's great is how wrong we are. I will not be wrong. I will do this right. I will be perfect. Good luck. And this is, to me, this is the core of an audience's heart. They work at a job every day where their boss demands that they be perfect or they do it right or do it da 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 and follow the rules. And they come and they can see a character on stage that also, yes, I'm going to do this right and my point of view is right and what? I'm wrong.
And then they also can find themselves in that, right?
Hmm.
And reflect. That was great. Thank you. But I will lead forward.
Hmm. Yes,
I still have some questions.
I like it.
Why
Do
not?
I have, is it okay to take a quick break so I can get more coffee?
Yes, let's make a break and then we start again.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
But
Welcome back.
here we are, part two.
Think. So we've been talking now a lot of stuff about the beginning, and I would like to ask you about one thing, which also I know, but people might not know.
Mm.
Uh, how did you meet teaching or idea of Keith Johnston? And from that, also, I'm leading to one of the duos you play.
Aha. So then I'll try to give you the short answer.
Who was first, he or her?
Uh, I knew of Keith before I met Patty. She is the her that you're speaking of.
Yes.
When I studied at Second City in the 80s, there was 1 week in the so maybe you do if you study for 1 year, I think it's 42 weeks or something. One of the weeks in one of the levels is Johnstone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so in uh
Where
a
is
hunt.
it?
What's this?
It was in the school or when in the college?
Yeah, in the training center.
Okay.
So let's say, let's see, 8 times 3 is 24. So let's say back in the day, it was you studied for less weeks because there was not as much teaching. So if we studied 150 hours before you graduate from Second City, then 3 of those hours were Johnstone.
Mm-hmm.
And the most popular in where I came up, the most popular knowledge of Johnstone was like he was the authority on status.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did get that part, and that was right. That was even Del Close. Uh, when he talked about impro, the book Impro. He said, the part on status is that's the thing you need to know. And and so I was aware of him, but I really didn't understand how that he was, more globally well known than Second City or Dell or anything. Like Keith was it. And then online happened. And so it's around the late 90s or 2000 or something. And then yesand.com starts. And so then all the improvisers in the world are going on yesand.com and typing all this stuff. And by this time, the big theater of Annoyance had closed in 2000. And I was one of the famous teachers from Annoyance. And we had made our mark in Chicago. And we all had our, Chicago maestro hats on our, staffs. And so people were, now because of the internet, now the global improvisation was able to talk to itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when the two schools sort of quickly became apparent. And by the two schools, I meant the two schools that were really known in North America and Europe, and in English speaking places. And then that's when I met Patty online, and we traded some ideas. And I think we both had kind of a rudimentary understanding of each other's world. And in those early years of the 2000s, I became aware that there were some Keith Johnstone schools, even in the United States. But they were, in a way, it was the same thing that we found 10 years earlier in Chicago, where you were either Second City or IO, or then, this new kid on the block, which is Annoyance. And so there was not this integrated idea that it's all the same thing, it's just a different application.
Mm-hmm.
But I was really curious, was like, well, what the hell, well, what are you doing? What is this? And I had been exposed to comedy sports before I heard of theater sports, and I had saw far more bad or not enjoyable, I won't call it bad, but not enjoyable comedy sports shows than good ones or ones that I had enjoyed. But theater sports sounded better to me, because at the end, like, I do love the theater and I love acting, and it's like, and then I was curious, well, how the hell would that work? And through corresponding with Patty, we found that we would find each other teaching a group of students that were used to the other one's school and taking 30 or 45 minutes at the beginning of class to say, yeah, but, well, there's another. And we were tired of having to explain ourselves or tired of trying to validate just a different point of view to teach a group of students who were, well, that's not what improv is. And so, so we had corresponded probably 3 or 4 years. And then I don't remember the year, but maybe like 2005 or something. Then we met in Austin, Texas. And then do I continue the story?
Not for me, but you and Patty are one of my favorite duos and shows.
Oh, thank you. And you made us a t-shirt, which I almost wore today.
Oh, I love this show because as you are the Del Close, not only of him, but you studied with Del, so people sometimes can read that. That you come from Chicago, from Mecca of improv and so on. And it definitely comes from under the wings of Keith Johnston, and she worked with him for many years. And what sometimes is what we can hear sometimes, that these two schools, they do not overlap, they do not have the same, they don't have maybe the same approach, but it's improv. To me, they each of them teaches the same things in different ways. But people think that this is very different. So how is it? I want to have two stories. One, how did you meet Patty, and how was the first meeting and show? And how is it to play with Keith Johnstonian school and student?
So we're in Austin, Texas, and it's somewhere around 2005, I guess, or 2006 at a festival. And I think Patty remembers the details of this story better than I, so I will tell the short version. One of us was there, and then the other one walks in. And so there was a little bit, because of yesand.com, and we had flagged to each other, hey, it'll be great to meet someday, let's have a beer, and let's talk through all of this. And the one conversation we had had online was, wouldn't it be great if we could just walk into the other person's school and just start and not have to waste 45 minutes of time trying to qualify our point of view. So on a very practical level, we were both excited about that. And I think maybe she was there first and then I came into the party. And so as she describes this, it's kind of like this West Side Story, the musical, like so the Sharks and the Jets. And like I walk in, or at some point someone's like, oh, there's that Johnstone chick, there's that Patty Styles Johnstone chick. I'm like, where is she? And Patty's like, oh, there's that Del Close guy, there's that Joe Bill, that Del Close guy, we saw you talking, oh, what's gonna happen? And and I just remember, I think I went over to her, I'm like, where is she? Because I just wanted to go hug her and to meet her finally. And we both went kind of at the same time, hi! And we hugged. And I think she said, beer? And I said, sure. And we went and got a beer. We went and got our first beer. And then we just sat on the ground and drinking beer. And we, you know how it is. It's like we had maybe 8 or 10 beers or something. And we just talked. And it was literally like meeting someone from my family for the first time. And we laughed and we said, well, one day we'll play together and prove to everyone that this is all bullshit.
That was the right decision.
Yes. And so I guess it was, you know, maybe it was 2009 or 10 or 11. I don't know. Somewhere in there. Maybe not quite 10 years ago. Or 10, I don't know. About 10 years ago. We find ourselves in Germany and we're at the Würzburg Festival and we're one of the headliners of one of the nights. So finally, here we go. Joe, Bill, and Patty Styles. They're going to play together and see if they can break impro.
And you broke it, as the legend says.
And so we knew for a year that we would play together and we would talk online and we would kind of start talking about what we might do, but we would always back out of it and we would never, let's talk about it later. We'll talk about it later. We'll talk about it later. So later comes, and now we're in Germany, the day of the show, and they say, okay, we're going to give you your technical rehearsal spot. So you can set up your keyboard player and we'll see what lights you need. And I hope it's okay, but there is going to be a television crew that is going to come and film your process. And we both were like, our process? So it had this really bizarre sense that they would get that our tech rehearsal would be the first evidence of us working together. So let's get this on camera. Let's get the news there. It was really bizarre. But we arrived and we said, yeah, just lights on and then we'll tell you when the lights are off. And does the piano sound good? Okay. Okay, well, we have 55 more minutes. And so then Patty was showing me some of Keith's comic books. And we were talking about how Keith and Del both like comics. And I was telling her a little bit about Del's record or comedy album. Like it's either How to Speak Hip or How to Talk Hip. I forget. But we're just chilling out. And this TV crew, this German TV crew walks into the room. And immediately we both just became different people. Immediately we just snapped into the game Let's Be on Television. Mm-hmm. And we just became more of ourselves. And is that? Oh, hi. Hey, how are you? We were just. And this woman comes and she interviews us. And can we see a little bit of what you're going to do? No, you'll have to wait for tonight. We were just sharing some ideas. What do you think about? Hey, what do you think about? So it was kind of like this behind the scenes bullshit interview. You'll have to see tonight. Come to the show tonight type thing. And, and we had just both decided we would just see. We would just wait and see. And we never said, let's just wait and see. It was always, we'll see. We never said, let's wait. We just said, we'll see. And everything will happen when it needs to happen. And so, yeah, and it's like, well, do we want to do some Johnstone stuff? Do we want to do a Herald? Do we want to do da-da-da-da-da-da? And so we said, well, we will do 2 acts, and one of the acts will do something that is more from the Del Chicago world, and one act we will do something more from the Johnstone world. And I say, which do you want to do first? And Patty said, I don't know, let's just improvise and we'll find out. Okay. And then then we'll take a break, and then whatever we didn't do, we'll do that in the second half. Okay, great. So we just decided to take a really simple suggestion, which is we had somebody give us a phone and choose a song that means something to them. And so I forget even the title of the song, but then we played the song as the lights were down as the intro music, and then the lights came up, and then we were 2 spies circling each other. So we finally meet. Yes, we do. And the scene totally reflected the reality. It was totally in my mind, it's like, oh, we're doing Dell. And in her mind, oh, we're doing Keith. and and then we performed for 52 minutes. And as I've said many times before, we went on a roller coaster ride of just emotion and honesty and story. And in 52 minutes, we did a perfect two-person herald that was also a perfect two-person narrative.
Mhm.
It was both. And it's like we had people crying. There were stories that were touching. There were stories that were silly. There were smart connections. There was fun game tricks in the middle of it. And every one of us would lead, and the other one would go, and the next one would lead, and the other one would go, and it was perfect. And we both at the intermission, we'll see you in 15 minutes. We walked backstage, and we were both just, wow. Now what do we do? And then we just hugged, and I think it was there's like it was just emotional and it was surreal. And I think 2 minutes before we went back on, she said, "Do you want to play some Keith games?" I said, "Yeah, sure." I said, "It's okay if I don't know what they are, right?" "Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's perfect. It's in fact that's ideal." And so, because there was also a festival cast there, that gave us the opportunity to bring some other people up. And I think I know Rama came up. I'm not sure if maybe Jim Libby came up, or Jacob, or yeah, I'm not sure, but a couple other people that were there, and we played some games. And some of them I understood, and some of them I didn't understand, and it was fine. And I just tried to keep it honest, and I felt very much like the student mind, like I don't know, but I will try, and I just trusted her, and it worked. And the audience, I must admit, like the audience loved it, and I wasn't quite sure why. um, but it's because I was confused and vulnerable, and I just let myself be that. And it turns out that was, I got lucky. That was the thing to do. Yeah. And so then, we're in this little theater that's supposed to only have 200 people, but there's 300 people. And it was, it was one of the most notable, maybe important, I don't know, like moments of my improv life. And then, and that's when we knew it's like, oh, it's all the same. Because at the end of the day, ever since that day, I've been saying improv is a service industry. It's like being a waiter.
Mhm.
Like my job is to serve you,
Mhm.
and that's it. And then whatever school I learn to serve you in, it doesn't matter because I'm just here to serve you. And the way that I serve you, I know that I'm more of an actor than I am a comedian. I know how to be a comedian, but really, I will serve you as an improvisational actor. And then if you give me signals that I need to be a comedian, I'll be a comedian. If you give me signals I need to be a clown, I'll be a clown. If you give me signals I need to be a mime, I'll be a mime. If you give me signals I need to sing, I will sing. And that's it. And yeah, and then all that's left is like, what do you like to do?
Yeah. I
And
saw
so,
all of that in the show, and actually in the show I saw the first time live, and I'm
uh-huh.
lucky that the rest of the shows I saw later online, even though they were played before. Uh, and I remember that I was touched in all of them. There were
Mm,
moments which were silly and funny, and there were
hmm.
moments which were deep and very touching. I can't. I don't know if you remember the moment when Patty was just tearing cleaning my tears in O'Connell's in Finland. But I came to her. I was like, "This was great. This was a great show." And then you came and she said, "Look at this girl. She's crying because of."
In
But but is it that every time you have these deep moments?
It's strange. Is was that the one when we did the same play but three different ways or something?
Yeah, the T-shirt one is from that one as well.
Oh, it's from that one. Yeah. So the funny story about that is the and maybe I don't know, maybe we've done 20 shows, and maybe in 18 of them we and everybody else at some point are crying,
Yeah.
but it's also we're laughing. Like we both like to play with emotion, and we have both discovered each other, and we know how to create together. In a way, it's now we've transcended. I'm not playing with a Keith, and she's not playing with Adele. Joe Bill is playing with Patty, and Patty is playing with Joe Bill. So our teachers are our teachers, but I know both of our teachers. Dell's been dead for 20 years. Keith is still alive, but I know that they would just want us to be us. And so the interesting thing was we were at the Athens Festival before Finland, and Trent, and we had done this show in Athens where we were on the beach, and it was a very moving.
I
Like,
yeah, yeah.
were you at that one too?
No, but I saw the show online, so I remember also this one. Well.
And that was interesting because we only had 25 minutes, and so we thought. Usually when we play, it's at a festival and we say, okay, what has not been at the festival yet? Let's play in a way that nobody's played. Let's see if we can challenge ourselves to play in a different way or in a new way for the festival. And because we only had 25 minutes, we thought, I think we just said, let's just do a one act play or something, or what's a location and let's see what happens. But it was so crazy. I thought we only have 25 minutes. We don't have to do anything deep. Let's just have fun and play honest and find a play. And then that play that we did was like so psychologically deep for me. And that character I played it was like pieces of my family and kind of mental illness and kind of like very vulnerable. And if I had thought about that before, I would think, no, 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 no. Let's not do that. That'll take too long. But it just worked out, and so there had been word of this show that spread, and before we got to Finland, Trent, in order to publicize the show, called this Joe Bill and Patty Styles Our Play. They're the duo that will make you cry. And Patty was so pissed. She's like, that's don't pigeonhole us. We don't have to make you cry. And I thought, well, that's not exactly fair, but also Trent is going to be Trent, and part of him is he's P.T. Barnum. He's going to, whatever he needs to put out to get people in, he's going to do. But I understood why Patty was upset, and so the funny thing about Finland was we decided, okay, no tears, no tears, no tears, no tears. And we do the first version of the play, and it's structurally good, and it's interesting and fun. And the second version was fun and silly and challenging and gamey. And then the third one, 5 minutes in,
everyone.
Everybody's crying, and it's oh my God, we had two examples of nothing even close to tears, and then of course the third one, and why it happens, I don't know. It's nothing that we aim for, I don't think. But I also think that because we play honestly and truthfully, a lot of times what's in us is what's in the world at the time. And so if there's sadness in the world, or if there's hurt in the world, or whatever, like we're both sensitive people that don't, especially on stage, we open up to each other. And so we both trust ourselves to go to a place that is very vulnerable, and you would not, if the audience is there for comedy, that's not one of the top 10 places you think you will go. But I know I can do that with her, and I know I can do that with Jill, for sure. But it's just but Patty and Jill are very different people, They're both brilliant. They're just different, but yeah. And I'm glad. Thank you for the shirt. I still love it. And that was the first time you saw us live. Was in Finland. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I knew Patty from some years back, but I remember that we met at the time. Uh, I have another thought about this show because I think that Patty is teaching it, but I think it's also under the skin of many improvisers who are doing this for a long time, that kind of looking for different patterns and breaking the patterns. So, if the show is like divided in three parts, it probably will be not funny, funny, funny. It will
Mm-hmm.
have, this unbalanced thing. But if it's the first part funny, then the other may be more serious. That is, this experienced improvisers like you, Patty, Jill, David, and many others, you just have natural feeling for that of doing this, changing the rhythm of the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I think one thing that experience might teach you is yeah, I use David Pasquesi's word. It's like how to pay attention. And so a young person pays attention in one way, but a more experienced person is just paying attention. And so you instinctively, impulsively know what's here right now when you go, and your instincts tend to be. I mean, any instinct is good as long as you don't doubt it, especially if you've got experience and if you just remain in service of the other person and in service of the show. And I think we decided before we came on, I think we said, we'll do three plays three ways, or one play three ways, or one movie three ways, or something, three different versions of the same play, or something like this. Um, and I remember at the beginning of that, when the first one started, another thing we play with, one of the differences in what Keith teaches and what Dell teaches is Keith says, trust your obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And Dell says, don't say the obvious thing, say the interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tend to align more with Keith's teaching here, but I've also discovered that sometimes the interesting thing is the obvious thing. And so for me, I like playing with the idea of what is the obvious and interesting thing. And without letting one or the other lead me, it's like, what's the thing? So just what's the thing? And I remember at the very beginning of the first one of those, there was something that just seemed obvious, but I think the lights came up and I was still on stage, but I wanted to make an entrance. So I just went off and then I came back on to make it a little messy or something. And I thought, I was aware that maybe that was a sloppy choice, or that was a. I was aware that that was a choice where I discovered one thing, but I decided another thing. So I'm going to do the decision instead of the discovery, and let's break improv.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think maybe Patty and I can't help ourselves. Like I have I have a pretty strong faith that if I'm playing with Patty, that the audience will be well served.
Yeah, that's for sure. I remember also in this show, which is one of the beautiful things that happened there, was that there was this opening door, and the first sentence was coming from opening the door, and Patty started every scene. And I remember that in each scene, there was opening with the door. There was a kiss in each scene in a certain place of the stage, and then the end of the scene, each scene was in the third place. And I don't know if this was consciously or you were just, repeating because of repeating or just happened, but it was really beautiful if one could see that because it was internal pattern between all the three scenes. But each scene was really different in case of tempo and meaning and a story and everything else.
Did did it start with she was coming into the room?
I think she opened the door, I think.
That's, yeah, I think it was the opposite of what I originally said. I think she was on, but then she went off in order to come back in. And I thought, oh, she's, part of me is, this is where David and I have a slight difference of opinion because I like, as soon as the lights come up, I like, we're here. Everything matters. And then David has the MacGuffin. So it's like for the first 30 seconds, it doesn't matter. You just, you figure it out. And this is just two types of OCD, I think. But yeah, so that's what I noticed. I noticed that choice, and I don't remember what you just told me sounds right, but I imagine that it was instinct rather than a conscious choice. But that's also the weird thing when I play with her is that, I mean, I learned improv through paying attention to patterns, and she always, everything she does is right in line with the patterns that I'm paying attention to. And so, what we've discovered is a lot of, we have different words for some of the same things because of two different schools. But but both approaches yield the same choices, or they tend to. So, yeah, that's cool. I didn't remember. I think that is out there somewhere. I think that.
Trent has it. I don't know if it's online. I don't think so, but I think he has it. It was recorded, I guess.
Yeah. Can you hear the rain falling through my microphone?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's my favorite. I love rain.
My question is, you come to Europe since quite a long time for teaching.
Yeah.
So, so you know the festivals and people and schools. So what's special about European festivals and European, let's say, I don't know if improv in general you can classify it like there was this discussion on internet, American improv and European improv. But what's special about Europe? What's different? What's special? Than
I think I think labels like European improv and American improv, they matter and they don't matter.
Mhm.
And something about me is that I tend to not go to places, I go to people.
Mhm.
And so I've been a person that I love other cultures and I love my life. Since I've discovered I'm an improviser, this is what I am. And now I've aged my way into now I'm one of the young old people. So this is my life. It's too late to stop now, and I won't because this is what I'm passionate about. So I don't want to just do improvisation just because it's fun and this is where I get my jollies. But for me, I want to do improvisation to make the world smaller. And so I think, my non-artistic reason for doing improvisation is I think improvisation is an act of rebellion to all the forces, the political forces in the world that are trying to push nationalism on us and I think different cultures are wonderful, but I think this rise in politicians wanting to say, let's just be one America, or one England, one Poland, one Hungary, that's bullshit. I think it's even that we're having this conversation is an act of rebellion, like that we get to share ideas. And this conversation helps make the world smaller. It helps remind people that we are connected and that we are all the same animals. And there's archetypes of these animals everywhere. And the reason that we make the world smaller with improvisation is to help people be less fearful and to feel more love. That's it. And so the way that we do that can be in any way that improvisation can exist. And no matter where in the world you go, there's some improv that some people will love and some people won't love. That's great. because in Europe there tends to be, it's a little bit similar to Canada, where people tend to be a little bit better actors, a little bit, they've read a wider variety of literature, and there's a greater sense of history because of the history of Europe and all the different countries and cultures on one continent. It allows me to be exposed to different minds and different brains. And even when I was in Dubai, when we did the festival there, to be able to go out to clubs or bars and sit with different people from different Middle Eastern countries, and to just hear their perspective on the world, and even the United States role in the Middle East, and what's fucked up and what's okay and what's, the Muslim countries and Israel. And one of the greatest nights of conversation I had, there was three Iranians we were just sitting and talking, and it was fucking great. And I think it's, people tend to be great and politicians tend to be not great. And it doesn't matter what country they're in. So the big reason I love coming to Europe, and the big difference, is that social reason, because I come to people. Artistically, there's a greater variety of an emphasis placed on the arts in Europe. It's also where I can go and perform in French and be terrified. And like, my favorite form of discomfort is speaking French and performing in French. I'm completely not comfortable, and I love it.
You read in my mind, because it was next question. What can challenge a guy like you who does improv for years?
Yeah, it's playing in French, because it's not just playing in another language, and it's also part of my, it's part of my ancestry. It's like I'm two Irish grandmothers, and then my father is Irish German and my mother is Irish French.
Mhm.
And so I know the German part of me, I know the Irish part of me very well, but I also have learned the French part of me. And so in this, there's family stories from everywhere, and then it goes back to like the Vikings, and there's some Swiss in there and blah blah blah. But the French part of me is also like, that's part of the family where we don't talk about that because they were crazy, and I'm kind of interested in that. But it's also an ego check, because when I improvise in French, I can't be the improviser that I am in English, and I'm very confident and comfortable with the improviser that I am in English. And in French, I'm just a buffoon, a bouffon, a buffoon. I can't even say buffoon right en français. And so then it is, now that I'm living in this other language, how can I be of service to people? And I can feel panic, like I can do nothing for you, but I have to let other people take care of me. And that in life, I don't do that. Like, I don't let other people take care of me. I don't ask for help. There's a lot of improvisers. We're like this. We don't ask for help. We take care of everybody else. We don't take good care of ourselves. We just want everyone to feel loved except for ourselves. We just want to have deep connections, so that you know that I love you, and the most important thing is, I love you. And that's like, okay, I gave her some peace and some love. Okay, what about me? Fuck me. You know what I mean? It's so that's my challenge. And there's still my I still want to improvise on every continent, so I still have to go to Asia. Right now I'm teaching people in China, I'm teaching people in Japan. But I also want to my dream is to do an improv festival in Antarctica. And someday, I'm just going to keep saying it until it happens.
Did this playing in French, did this change your playing with improvisers like me, for example, who is who's English not a native language and the second or third or whatever? What's
Yeah.
the language? What's how
Yeah. Because I'm interested in neuroscience, I also it made me research what does your brain do when you speak a different language.
Mhm.
And so some interesting stuff I found about that. You know, the headline is we're different people in different languages.
Mhm.
And it also made me realize how wrong I was during the entire history of the Chicago Improv Festival. When people would come to America and perform in their second language or third language, and I would teach and I would say, it doesn't matter, it's okay, just relax, have fun. And the first time I played in French, if somebody would have told me it doesn't matter, just relax and have fun, I would have murdered them.
Doesn't
Be-
work.
because there's nothing in there that I have no access to that. And so I thought, oh, okay, shit, I was wrong for 15 years. But then the trick that I learned, it's totally the opposite of what you think. The only way to improvise in a tongue that is not your native tongue is to not translate on stage. The only way to improvise is just to be present. Because if I'm trying to think of a word or if I'm trying to translate what you say, if you're speaking French and I'm translating into English, then I cannot be present because I'm looking at here more than I'm listening to that. So it's like a meditation. It's like, okay, I speak some French. I have an opinion that I speak shitty French and I speak shitty French very poorly. But I do speak some French. I do understand some French. So all of that is like a herald. And now I'm going to forget about it and I'm just going to be present and let's see if something can happen. But when I do my best in French, I'm thinking in French, I'm living in French. Even in the French, even when I don't understand something, my brain is working in French.
Mhm.
And even when I do Duolingo and I'm studying my French, I translate French into other French. Like I'm using synonyms. Like I've gotten to the point where I I know how to think in French, but it's not by trying. It's just by being French me.
Mhm.
And then that, if we put it in Johnstone terms, like I am just lower status.
Yeah.
So now I have more empathy, I think, and I marvel. I mean, Europeans where you're non-native English speakers, oh my God, your English is so much better than my French will ever be. And it's the same face, and everybody I talk to, you all have the same face. Like, are you crazy? No, because we all think, ugh, my English is terrible, my French is terrible, my Spanish is terrible. But it's just because it's hard enough for us to accept ourselves in our own mother tongue as humans. So how are we supposed to accept a lesser version of ourselves in a language that is not our native language? This is it's like I need a French therapist.
But I just came to me this question right now uh, because you experience that, but not everyone experienced that, especially American or English, or let's say English-speaking teachers. Uh,
Yeah.
they most of the time they do not play in other languages, I think, or
Yep.
not
That's right.
everyone. So, do you think this just came now? Do you think it would be good that if there are international festivals, and especially when maybe Europe, but I guess it's the same in States, that there are people who come from outside of English-speaking countries, that there is like kind of that there should be a kind of awareness be built up around that, because I think nobody thinks about it in the festivals. You know, like you come, okay, you speak English, let's go, let's speak, and people play with you with mixer teams, other stuff. You know, they just talk in English because that's their first language, and I
Yep.
think they do not, they are not aware. Do you think this could be a good thing, like just being aware and remind teachers before the festivals, like, hey guys, remember about these people who come here and this is not their first language?
Yeah, I mean, if Americans, especially white Americans, are so proud of their European heritage, then why aren't you speaking the language of your ancestors? Why don't you at least learn a little bit? But I think Americans, it's like Rome. It's just like ancient Rome. Like Americans have gotten fucking lazy and entitled and like, oh, speak English. Yeah. For me, one of my favorite theater sports game is your third language, speaking your third language. So, and I'm surrounded by Spanish in Chicago every day, but my Spanish is much worse than my French, and my French is terrible. But when I knew, I just know the word tragico in Espanol because when I was in Colombia with Felipe, we did a theater sports kind of show there. And Felipe says, he asked me in Spanish, how was your Spanish? I said, mi español es trágico. And everybody laughs. And he surprised me, will you do a scene in Spanish? Yes, sí, of course, yeah. And I didn't think, and I used the same lessons from French. It's like, I'll just be my Spanish self now. And I know how to be in a bar or in the bathroom in Spanish. So I just started brushing my teeth. And I did a scene in Spanish because I did not have time to worry about it. But I think that, especially like when I'm teaching a scramble or I'm directing a format with a mixed cast, in the last 5 years especially, it's been very important for me to see if we can have all the languages be in this format. Because I think we don't have to speak the same language to understand each other. And so I look at it as an artistic challenge. And I've done pretty well directing shows where like, okay, let's figure out a way where we can speak the different languages. When we did the Bat in Athens, that's also online. We did the Bat in Athens and it was a mixed cast, and I think we have 5 or 6 different languages. And it's and English was the base language, but there was at one point in the Bat there's a traffic jam and people are stuck in traffic and people are yelling out of the cars in all the different languages. And for some reason, we're in Athens, but people yelling at each other in traffic in Greek sounds perfect. Like, I don't speak Greek. There's Greek in Chicago too, but everybody has been in a traffic jam before. And no matter if it was Greek or Finnish or I think there was Bulgarian, Dutch, French, maybe Polish too.
Maybe Kasia was there, I don't know.
Yeah, it was Kasia. Oh no.
Or Alicia.
Yeah, Alicia. It was such a beautiful moment when it's like all the languages, and everybody in the audience knew what was going on. And because most of the audience are native Greek speakers, when Greek would then come out over the top, because of the reaction of the audience, anyone who did not speak Greek knew exactly what was going on without understanding the language. And you could feel their hearts open up when the Greek would ride over the top of this soundscape. And for me, that is like my eyes get teary and I'm like, ah. And again, because it's an act of rebellion. It's like a fuck you to that Bible story of the Tower of Babel. It's like, yeah, we can all speak different languages. We can be artists like this. So I don't know if this is too heavy. I don't mean to. This is my 3rd cup of coffee. This is Joe on 3 coffees. Now I'm a militant.
But you said something about neuroscience.
Ah.
That's topic which you love. So
Mm-hmm.
tell me more about why you're interested in this and what's your discovery about it? What interesting for us improvisers in that?
There's a couple of things that led me to neuroscience, but the thing about improvisation I became most interested in is what is our brain doing when we judge ourselves negatively?
Mhm.
So, what is the neuroscience of self consciousness? Because self consciousness is, my thesis is self consciousness is what being in your head is. So, you're analyzing, I'm in my head, I can't improvise, I'm in my head. Yeah. So, it's self consciousness is when I'm paying more attention here than I am there.
Mhm.
So, I was interested in different approaches to exercises that help us to feel when our brain is doing this and feel when our brain is doing this. And I looked at some kind of classic acting training, Meisner stuff. What is our brain on Meisner? What is the purpose of Meisner? What is the purpose of certainty? Of like, let's play a scenario and can I imagine how this is the truth and this is the truth and this is the truth? And so I had one coach that was very believed in Meisner a lot in the 90s and I hated it. And I didn't think he was, an effective coach at that time. And I didn't see the point. I was just focused on the repetition. But what I learned was like, it is all about getting to the truth.
Mhm.
And so, and Razowsky and I we can both have a drink and we could do this monologue about facts and the truth are different. And that's when we're acting, when we're improvising, when we're in an emotional state, the way that we're paying attention when we improvise is within a reality that we agree is truth. And so, how is our brain working when we are in an agreed sense of truth? And I know that whatever you give me is not going to threaten that truth. And in Meisner exercises, if you block the truth, if you block something, if you can't see or acknowledge what is the truth here now, then that's self-consciousness.
Mhm.
So for me, one of my teaching tools when we're live in person, I'm still trying to figure out how to do it online, is to get students to feel their brain working when it's open or in jazz, and to feel their brain working when it's closed and examining themselves in engineering.
Mhm.
And what's the difference between our brain working one way or our brain working the other? And can we develop flexibility so when we're improvising, we can intuitively have our self consciousness just run in the background? It's like a meditation, right? It's like, okay, I know I judge myself. I know I'm unhappy. Okay, what's this? What's this? What's this? Now I'm just witnessing. I'm witnessing. I'm witnessing my brain's activity. It is allowed, but it's in balance to the reality that we're creating here. And so my interest in neuroscience is primarily to develop exercises as a teacher to help people feel what it's like to be out of their head so that they can be out of their head. And this is mostly because when I asked teachers coming up, nobody had a good answer for me. When I said the best answer was from my a teacher, Jeff Michalski, and I said, "How do I get out of my head?" And he said, "Why don't you try stand up?" It's still one of my favorite answers. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes.
Because yeah, I can talk for 3 hours, but I don't want to talk for 3 hours about this.
This will be last or one of the last questions. Uh, what's astrology is doing in your improv life?
Um, because I'm a little bit of a science nerd, and astrology is a fake science. It's a fake science that a lot of people use. And in previous marriages, I was married to people that held astrology and even numerology as something they were very, very interested in. So I had to learn it. The reason I love it is because it is a type of a measuring stick.
Mhm.
And so, and even when I train corporate people, there are different assessment tools where you take a test and it tells you, this is your leadership style, this is your communication style, this da 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 da. I call all of these things, I call them corporate horoscopes because the nature of a horoscope is it tells you who you are, who you get along with, and who you don't get along with. Uh, and it's like I call it it's the horror of knowing who you are. And so for me, it's something I can take on stage with me because I know like a little quip about every astrological sign that I can use on stage if I need to. But it also sometimes it's a good hint if I'm a teacher or just if I'm going to drink with someone, the type of conversation that they will have with me. And so uh, it's I don't I don't walk around with my astrology book reminding myself and learning more about it, but I know if I'm talking to someone who is Libra, I know how to have a conversation with a Libra that is a starting point that is a good guess to have them balance and weigh things. I know if I am talking with someone who's a Taurus like me and Kasha, it's like we are very grounded, pragmatic, practical, connected to the earth people. I know if I'm talking to a Gemini, I can say, which one of you is here today? The light one or the dark one? And so, at the very least, it's an icebreaker, even if people say, I don't believe in that shit. Okay, next topic. So, that's what it is for me.
My dear friend, this is the end of my questions for today. We did it. Thank
Yes, we
you
did it.
so much.
Thank you. It was my joy.
That was really great and such a nice, and we never had such a long peaceful time to go to have a conversation like that.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, we've been talking for like 2.5 hours.
Oh,
So nice.
great.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. Especially like during the time and the pandemic and all the shit that's going on. I think I told you last night when we checked in, I said like, yeah, I just need to hang out and just feel connected to.
So, shall we play a scene together?
Sure. How would you like to start?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is a game called Playbook. I will be reading one part of a two-person scene from a play called Superior Donuts by Tracy Letts, a famous American playwright who also lives in Chicago. I will be reading one of the parts in a two-person scene, and then Monica will be improvising the other part. And in order to start, Monica, you're going to tell us what our relationship is. And then as I read my one part, we'll see if you can make our relationship fit into this script.
Okay.
Okay?
So maybe we are roommates in dormitory during the study.
We're roommates in a dormitory.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Divorced?
Almost.
Recent?
You can say like that.
Okay, so you're single these days.
I I feel like single.
Yeah, me too. Kinda.
Yeah.
Yeah. How come you don't go out with that lady cop?
I I just thought I need some time for myself.
She's sure into you. I seen her. When she comes by, I think she wants to drink a big tub of your bathwater. And I wish I hadn't said that because I just got a little sick in my mouth.
I'm surprised. I didn't expect that.
You hadn't noticed?
Completely not at all. I'm really surprised.
No, I'm friendly. She's good to go.
I appreciate that.
Pick a verb, any verb.
Walking.
That's hard to believe. The way you dress and everything.
I dress as I like, just to feel freedom.
Nothing.
Mm. Come on.
Come on now. Look at yourself. I hate to break it to you, but the Grateful Dead ain't gonna hire a new guitar player. That old man died and they just called it quits.
Someone died.
You might be comfortable naked, but that don't mean it looks good.
Come on. You're going too much forward.
I ain't going out with no lady cop.
You are always. I appreciate you.
Suit yourself.
Okay.
First of all, your ponytail has to go.
What do you mean? What's wrong with that?
Let me tell you who looks good in a ponytail. Girls and ponies.
I'm still studying.
And you ain't ashamed yet?
I didn't think about it. Like you. No, when you pointed now, maybe it's.
Yeah, I'd lose the t-shirts. Get some shirts buttoned down the front. Hide your belly a bit. Then it'd be some time for some new jeans.
You're probably right. It's a bit old-fashioned.
Get you some good shoes. Not tennis shoes neither, unless you're going to play tennis. And shave that nasty-ass beard. Throw out all the white tube socks. And here's a tip about patchouli. It smells like cat piss.
It's so much. It's so many changes.
Did I say trim your eyebrows?
You didn't.
Then that's it. And scene! Yay! It's my favorite game and nobody plays it anymore. So